Welcome back to Eye of the Storm, a St. John's video series presented by the New York Post. Welcome back to Eye of the Storm. I'm Dexter Henry, and with the 2025-2026 college basketball season about to tip off, there's buzz around Queens like we haven't seen in years. Rick Pitino, St. John's Red Storm, they've been picked just ahead of UConn to win the Big East, a sign that this program isn't just back, but expected to contend. Joining me to break it all down is New York Post St. John's beat reporter Zach Braziller, who's been tracking this team every step of the way. Zach joins me now. Zach, what's going on, man?
Hey, man, how are you?
I'm good, man. How was your summer? I felt like we were doing this a lot this season. Then it was no St. John's and, out of it. But how you doing?
Good. I'm ready to go. It
go?
should be a fun year. I mean, last year was incredible, and they brought in a lot of good players. It's a very different team, and that's kind of college basketball in 2025. Every year is basically brand new.
Yeah, I know, and this is what makes this exciting as we do the season preview, because last year you gave some hope to the St. John's fan base. And Zach did that. He gave some hope to the St. John's fan base. And
I think Rick Pitino gave some hope. Okay, I just chronicled it.
I was trying to give you
I'm not taking any credit for that.
I was trying to give you a little bit of credit that you gave some hope to the fan
I
base.
deserve no credit for their season.
All right, so let's start with this, because St. John's, they got picked ahead of UConn to win the Big East. What do you think that says about the program's perception heading into year 3 under Rick Pitino?
Look, they're preseason number 5 in the AP poll, which is the highest ever in program history. It's hard to find a national ranking or poll where they're not a top 10 team. I mean, they brought in the top transfer class in the country. They bring in one of the best two-way forwards, out there in Zuby Ejiofor. They have Rick Pitino. I think they're better on paper than they were last year. Now, is it going to translate? We'll see. They have a very different team. They have better shooting. I think there's no question about that. They have more depth, especially up front. I think their front court is as good as there is in the country. Now, everyone's going to wonder about the point guard situation. That's going to be the big question. Last year the question was shooting. This year it's going to be point guard. They have Dylan Darling, big sky player there from Idaho State, who's probably going to come off the bench. He's like the one true point guard. And I think you'll see a lot of Dillon Mitchell as like a point forward. You'll see some of, Isaiah Sellers, the Stanford transfer, Ian Jackson a little bit on the ball. But, that's the real question is, do they have that point guard, and is that going to lower their ceiling?
Yeah, that's a big question with them. We'll get to Dillon Mitchell, who you mentioned there. We'll get to him a little bit later. There's a lot of expectations with this team, obviously now. You said that you think they could be better than they were last year, and a lot of people feel that way. But what have you seen or heard from practices that validates those expectations that we have right now in the preseason?
They had 2 exhibition games, and the second one was against Michigan, who's preseason number 7. They lost in overtime, but the front court was tremendous. And they're facing Michigan has a front court where they have 2 7-footers, and then they have Yaxel Lendeberg, who's one of the best forwards in the country. They're not going to face a front court nearly as good as Michigan in the league all year. I mean, the only front court they're going to face that's even on par with Michigan maybe is Kentucky when they go down to Atlanta and play them. I mean, this front court with Ejiofor, with Dillon Mitchell, Bryce Hopkins, Ruben Prey is as good as there is in the country. I mean, they more than held their own against Michigan. Ejiofor was tremendous. You saw Bryce Hopkins and Mitchell were both very good. They're going to give just teams in this league. There aren't teams in this league that are going to be able to match up with them inside. Now, it's on the guards to stretch the floor and hold their own so teams just can't completely collapse in the paint. But this front court is by far the best that I've seen St. John's. When I've covered the team, it's probably as good as they've ever had. I mean, they have 4 really, really good forwards. And, most years if St. John's has 2, it's a lot.
See, this is Zach out here giving the people hope, getting you excited about this St. John's team. Okay, so when you talk about these expectations, right, from watching the preseason, games that they've had and then practices, how's Pitino balanced pushing his guys hard and then keeping them confident with those expectations and the heightened pressure of being the Big East favorites here?
Yeah, I mean, he's never been big on rankings. Last year preseason they just missed and he didn't care. This year they're 5 and he doesn't care. I mean, his focus has just been daily improvement, and they have a lot of new players, so they have a long way to go. I don't think there's any question about that. They're nowhere near a finished product, just like nobody else is this time of year. He doesn't talk about expectations and what they want to be in March. His focus is just on daily improvement and, being ready because their non-conference schedule is really good. It's much better than it's been in a while. Second game of the year, they get Alabama, top 20 team. They go to Las Vegas and they play Baylor and Iowa State, and then a third team that's probably pretty good, depending on how the first two games are. They have Ole Miss here, arguably a top 25 team. Then they go to Atlanta and play Kentucky, who's, I think, might be the best team in the country. So, that's been his focus, is being ready by November 3rd and daily improvement. He's not worried about January, February, or March because he knows they have to be ready. Look, they're going to lose more games. They lost 5 games all last year. They're going to lose more games just because they're playing a much better schedule. They could lose 3 non-conference games and still feel good about themselves because that's how good this non-conference schedule is.
No, it is a really good non-conference schedule. And then, you just talked about it. I caught something there. Las Vegas, you got a trip there. Not quite as good as the Bahamas last year.
Take it.
We got Zach traveling again, where he's going to make me a little bit jealous here in the early part of the season. I'll take it. Enjoy that trip to Las Vegas. You said Atlanta too, right?
Atlanta, December 20th. That'll be a really fun one.
That'll be nice. Las Vegas and then the ATL. Can't be mad at that. You talked about this with the guards, Zach, and you wrote about this. Rick Pitino, he's been more vocal about wanting his guards to do more in terms of decision making and also ball movement. You also said they need to stretch the floor. How is the staff addressing that with the guys, those guards right now, to make sure that they do those things as they get ready for the season to start on November 3rd?
Yeah, so Monday's film session did not harp on many positives, even though I thought there were a lot of positives to take from the game against Michigan. But yeah, we talked to a bunch of the guys Monday night, and they were all said, yeah, he was on us pretty good about not rebounding. Now, to be fair, 2 of their starting guards, Josan Sanin and Sellers, barely played in the Michigan game. The game was terribly officiated. There was a million fouls called. It was an exhibition game that took almost 2.5 hours, which is, for a college game, is ridiculous. So, Sellers only played 8 minutes. He fouled out. Sanin only played 14. So 2 of their better guards, arguably, them along with Ian Jackson, are their best guards. So 2 of their better guards really didn't play a lot. And Dusty May, the Michigan coach, said after the game, the difference in the game was 2 of their best guards weren't on the court much. I'd like to reiterate how awfully officiated that game was.
I can tell you did not like it.
I mean, it's an exhibition game. We should not be playing 2.5 hours.
Yeah, that's the big one.
But no, he was hammering them home about, look, they have the athleticism, they have the length to have good rebounding guards. And he basically laid it out for them in the film session. I was told, we have to be better in this area because they got out rebounded by 12 by Michigan, and Michigan's huge. But they didn't get out rebounded because of the front court. The front court rebounded. I think the 3 Hopkins, Ejiofor, and Mitchell had around 20 plus rebounds together. The issue was the guards didn't rebound. And that's one thing they're going to have to do better because of St. John's size and athleticism up front. Teams are going to be taking a lot of perimeter jump shots, and that's long rebounds.
The guards to box out.
So, and last year, look, you had Kadari Richmond, who was a really good rebounder for a guard. Davon Smith, who was a very good rebounder for a guard. That's one area that that the guards need to do better in. And look, their 2 most talented players, arguably, are Sanin and Ian Jackson. They're 2 guys that NBA people think have the potential to be first-round picks. They're also only sophomores.
Right.
And, Ian Jackson comes from North Carolina. Sanin comes from Arizona State. There are different expectations that are being placed on these 2 guys here. We all know how demanding Pitino is. So it could take some time for these guys who are young. If you looked at the guards last year, Richmond and Smith, these are guys who've been in college for a long time. Yeah. Who are seniors and had really been through it. Sanin is an incredibly talented player. He had 14 points in 14 minutes, but, he didn't have any assists or any rebounds. Pitino wants him to do other things. Same thing with Ian Jackson. I just think with the backcourt, people need to be patient. These are younger guys. And the strength of the team right now, no doubt, is the front court. There's no question about it.
All right, so when you look at this is a very newish roster, you can say. Do you expect any changes in style in terms of the way Pitino will play? Will there be more pressing? Will he play a faster tempo, different defensive coverages? How do you see this roster playing compared to last year?
I think it's going to be very similar. I think you're going to see a lot more threes. I don't think there's any question about that. They have more guys who can shoot the three. You mentioned Jackson, Sannon, Sellers was one of the best three-point shooters in the country last year. You have Lefteris Leotopoulos off the bench. Hopkins and Zuby can both shoot threes. Dillon Darling can shoot the three. I accept more threes, but in terms of the up, no, they're going to play fast. I think they're going to play faster than last year. That with Mitchell atop the press, that really gives them a really athletic, long guy, to create problems. And that press early was good against Michigan, then it kind of fell off a little late. Michigan went over the top of it a few times. That's obviously stuff they have to work on. But yeah, I think they're going to be a top 20. Last year, I think they're around 50s in tempo. I think they're going to be in like the top 20 at least. They're going to play. They're going to look to play fast. When everyone's going to kind of handle the ball. So like, especially you have a guy like Mitchell, he's going to get it and go. They're gonna real like with their athletes, they're gonna really look to get out in transition.
All right, so you see some faster pace in terms of St. John's this year. That'll be interesting to see as well. Now, Zuby Ejiofor, I want to talk about him because he decided to return to this team instead of chasing a pro opportunity. He could have done that. He didn't do that. In your eyes, how significant is his commitment to coming back to St. John's, both on the court and in the locker room? And do you look at him as somebody who can be one of the best big men in the country this year?
Yeah, look, I've seen him on preseason All-American lists, second team, third team. He's terrific. I mean, R.J. Lewis was the player of the year in the Big East last year. You could have made an argument for Ejiofor. St. John's was just a completely different team when he wasn't on the court. Even in the Michigan game, he went out for a few minutes. Is really when they had a 5-point lead, and when the game turned, when Lendenberg, the Michigan star forward, kind of went off, it was with Ejiofor out of the game. He's just such a difference maker at both ends of the floor. He's more skilled. He can score in the paint, score a little bit on the perimeter. I mean, yeah, it gives them a legit top 15 player in the country. I don't think there's any question. We're not talking about ceiling. We're talking about what he is right now. Could Sannon or Jackson become that? Bryce Hopkins, yeah. But like right now, I don't think anyone would argue that they have a top 15 player in the country. And I think he's going to have an NBA career. I think he's going to play 8 to 10 years in the NBA. I just think he has that work ethic. He has that determination, and he's a guy that keeps getting better. I know he's kind of a tweener because he's only around 6'9",
right?
But he has that team first determination and grit that I think he will get drafted in the second round, if not higher, and I think he will have an NBA career. I think he has that innate, I will find a way to get it done that you need if you're kind of not that big time guy.
Right, especially when you're a kind of tweener guy, you
Right.
kind of need that kind of attitude to have that edge to make it in the NBA. I want to talk to you about Ian Jackson. I know Ian Jackson a little bit from watching him in high school. I saw him play for a bit. He's embraced massive expectations, right? Coming back home to NYC after playing in North Carolina. What do you think is realistic to expect from him and his talent right away? And how is he handling the spotlight right now, being back in the Big Apple?
Yeah, Pitino's talked a lot about how much he's improved since the summer. He has not played well in the exhibition games, and he admitted he's been tentative and hasn't really played like himself. And yeah, I just think people need to be patient. He's young. He's only a sophomore. He's got incredible ability. When he just goes and doesn't think, you see the talent. He just needs to kind of find his rhythm. Kadari Richmond, it took him a while last year. And he was a senior who's, been through all this. And, Siddiqui Ibn Ayo, one of their backups, co-captains, was talking about how it's kind of similar, where it's a New York guy who comes home and there's a lot of expectations, a lot of pressure, and he wants to do good so bad. Sometimes that kind of gets in the way, when you want to please people and you want to be that guy. And, the good thing with this team is he doesn't have to do that right away. They have so many other guys. Just pick your spots. You don't need to be the 25 point guy right away. And Pitino has raved about his work ethic. He's always watching film with the coaches after practice. He wants to get better. He wants to be better. And I think it's going to come. It just might not happen right away.
All right, be patient. Be patient with Captain Jack. Might not come right away. He's a very talented player, very athletic, can do a lot on the court. I'm sure we'll see some of that, but just got to be a little bit patient here. You've also mentioned Dillon Mitchell. Came in as a transfer. He's talked about wanting to be an X factor here for the team. Where do you see his impact being most felt in Pitino's system?
I think it's everywhere. I think it's, as a rim protector, a guy who can guard multiple positions. It's, he could be a backup center. He could play. You could play a small ball. He could be a small ball five. He's at the top of the press. I think you're going to see a little bit of point forward with him, kind of the old Ben Simmons role. He's 6'8". He can really handle the ball. It's kind of what he did at Montverde in high school on loaded teams. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife. Zuby Ejiofor called him an X factor for this team, and he's looked really good in both preseason games. And the thing you like about him, he can impact the game without scoring. He plays above the rim, so he's going to get some highlight dunks that people are going to love. He had 2 of them in the Michigan game, but I just think his value is just he gives them a second elite defender up front with Ejiofor. He can handle the ball, kind of see over defenses. I think he's a guy when teams are pressuring, you could really use him, to kind of throw over the press. I can see him being the biggest impact of all the transfers. Wow. I think he's that. And look, they have a lot. I think Hopkins has looked really good. Sand and Jackson are going to have their moments. Dylan Darling's going to be important. I just think he's kind of like one of those. He's like a glue piece that every really good team needs.
Okay, glue guy. There you go. Could be the glue guy for the St. John's team. We'll see if that plays out. Okay, so St. John's, they're picked to win the East. They just edge out UConn as being picked to be the favorites to win the East. Beside UConn, which team poses the biggest threat to St. John's title hope, trying to go back-to-back in the Big East this season?
Creighton, there's no doubt. I mean, on paper, it's a 3-team league. All 3 of these schools are ranked. Creighton not as high as St. John's and UConn. But yeah, Creighton lost a lot, especially Ryan Kalkbrenner, their 4-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year. But they brought in some really good transfers. They have some really good players coming back. It's Creighton. But I'd be surprised if it's not St. John's or UConn. I really would.
You'd be shocked if they're...
Yeah, they're both preseason top 5 teams. They're both loaded. I think UConn's going to be much better than it was last year. I think St. John's has the chance to be better than it was last year. If you look at Pitino's 2 years in the league, his first year he didn't have a team quite equipped to play with UConn, and last year St. John's was the clearly superior team. This year I think they're kind of on even footing, which should make those 2 games just awesome.
Man, can't wait for those games, especially the one that St. John's playing them at the Garden this year, right?
Of course.
Yeah, that would just be bad business if they did not do that. That would be bad
yes.
at all. All right, before this, because we're going to get your prediction, we're going to see how happy you make the people this year.
God.
But, yeah, I know, predictions. What do you see as the single biggest variable that will determine whether St. John's is cutting down the nets in March, I'm saying it, winning it all, or have fans left wondering, what if, once again? What's the biggest variable between them winning a national championship or not winning a national championship?
Yeah, it's the one question. It's point guard. Could Dylan Darling hold up? Can Dillon Mitchell be effective as a point forward? Are Jackson and Sellers going to emerge at that spot? They play a motion offense where it's not really predicated on one guy having the ball and running offense, and they're going to play really fast and be up and down. But yeah, there are times you do need that guy, that steadying presence kind of running the show. Dylan Darling really struggled in the Towson game, came back and looked much better against Michigan. He still felt like there were a lot of plays he left out there, but he definitely was better and looked like he could play at this level. But yeah, I don't think there's any question. Do they have enough playmaking? Do they have that guy? Last year they had 2 of them in Richmond and Smith, and this year it's kind of uncertain. To me, it's really the only question. They have enough shooting. The front court's great. They have depth. They obviously have the coach. Do they have that answer? Is that going to kind of limit how far they can go?
We will see. That will be answered. What does St. John's have at the point guard position? We'll see. But, I'm not letting Zach get out of here without a prediction. That's not going to happen here on Eye of the Storm. Zach's breathing heavy, so he's stressed about this right here. Okay, first thing, we're going to take with the conference.
All right.
What does St. John's do in the conference this year? Do they win the conference?
I'm going to say they finished tied with UConn.
Nobody wants to hear that.
They split down the middle. They split the season series.
Co-Big East champs.
They both go 17-3.
All right, so co-Big East champs you
Yes.
have. All right, then what do you think they can do in the tournament?
I'm going to go with a 2 seed in the tournament and the Elite Eight.
2 seed and the Elite Eight.
Yes.
Do you think St. John's fans are going to be happy with your prediction here?
Yeah, I think.
You think so? Okay.
I think most to me this year is all about March.
Yeah.
They could win the Big East. They could not win the Big East. To me, it doesn't really matter. They hit all the benchmarks last year of things they haven't done in so long. They won a Big East regular season. They won the postseason tournament. They won an NCAA tournament game. The one thing they left on the table, they haven't been into a Sweet 16 since the Elite Eight team in '99.
Yep.
So to me, this year is all about March. They're going to make the tournament, whether they have a great regular season or a mediocre one or whatever it is. They're going to make the tournament. In my opinion, there's no question about that. It's all about March. It's about playing deep into March. It's about getting. To me, if they get to the second weekend, I think you're happy. Obviously you want to get to the Final Four. You want to win a national championship, and I think they have the potential to do that. But I think if you get to a Sweet 16, most fans will be happy because that hasn't happened in so long.
Yeah.
I think Elite Eight people will be happy. Yeah, they'll be like, "Oh, we should have made the Final Four."
Yes,
but in time,
happen.
when you look back at this season, I think most fans would feel like that's a good year.
All right, so maybe you should feel good about what Zach is predicting.
Look, I think you should feel good no matter what. You're top 5 of the country entering the year. You have a loaded roster. You have Rick Pitino as coach. You're viewed by most people as a lock to make the NCAA tournament. If you're a St. John's fan, you're not happy. I don't really understand. I don't understand why.
Come on, some people are just miserable all the time.
You could be a Mets and Jets fan. Come on.
This is true. I used to know that life. Half of that. That's another story for another day. That is Zach Braziller. Check him out. He is going to be covering St. John's, as he's been doing for years, this entire season. He'll be with me on Eye of the Storm. We'll be at a lot of games together. We'll be doing a lot of these videos. It's going to be fun. And you know what? Every week, people are going to be checking to see if your predictions are good and right. If not, they're going to come for you in the comments.
What else is new?
What else is new? That's the last. We'll see you next time on Eye of the Storm.